White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller has also attacked the federal judge who ordered an injunction on Trump's deportation under the Alien Enemies Act.
The judge's order was patently unlawful. Beyond unlawful, it was an outrageous assault on the Constitution, an outrageous assault on the sovereignty of the nation, and on democracy itself. The idea that a single district court judge has the authority to direct, as though they were the president, the movement of airplanes around the globe is, again, it is the most outrageous thing I've seen from a district court judge in my lifetime, but frankly, going back multiple lifetimes.
But let's be clear, it wasn't that long ago that Miller was cheering on judges who ruled against the government during the Biden administration. In fact, during the first months of Biden's presidency, Miller started an organization called America First Legal to fund challenges in federal court against the Biden administration. In May of 2021, a federal judge in North Texas granted AFL's clients a preliminary injunction to prevent COVID relief funds from going to women and minority business owners. Miller called his group's win a, quote, clear repudiation of illegal and discriminatory conduct. There's more. In July of 2021, after the AFL won an injunction on Department of Agriculture spending, Miller said it sends a powerful message. In August of 2021, when AFL secured an injunction from a judge against one of Biden's executive actions on immigration, Miller said this injunction is a critical first step towards ending Biden's lawsuit assault on our people. We must now fight to make those injunctions permanent. President Trump, meanwhile, continues to attack the judiciary for stopping some of his executive actions. On Friday, he took to Truce Social, posting, no district court judge or any judge can assume the duties of the President of the United States. Only crime and chaos would result. And yet, as recently as December of last year, Trump applauded an order from a district court judge in Texas who blocked the Biden administration's sale of border wall materials, calling it a major and crucial win for the country. And earlier this month, Trump continued to heap praise on Judge Aileen Cannon, who repeatedly stepped in to effectively end the Biden Justice Department's prosecution against him for allegedly hoarding nuclear secrets. So, Joe, certainly rank hypocrisy here from Stephen Miller, who formed a whole organization to applaud the work of federal judges, almost all of them from Texas, mind you, and the President Trump himself, who, has now, though, when there's a judge he disagrees with, takes to Truth Social and seemingly endorses calls for impeachment.
Well, and of course, the president has praised judges who agree with him and said the press should never criticize judges. It should be illegal, I think he said. And then the next week he will criticize judges and everybody else will call them Marxists or this or that or the other for doing, as you pointed out, the same thing they were cheering district court judges, mainly in the state of Texas, for doing during the Biden and the Obama administrations. And, Sam Stein, that's what's so crazy here. I mean, I can certainly understand any administration being upset that a single federal district court judge could stop an executive order, could stop a policy that they were pursuing. But when I say I can understand why, because didn't we hear that from Barack Obama all the time? How can a single federal court judge in Texas stop an executive order from the President of the United States? We heard it from Joe Biden. We certainly heard it from Donald Trump. And so, again, second verse, same as first. I mean, this has been going on for some time. If you want to be critical, and many people have been critical of the idea that a single federal district court judge can stop, a national action, well, you certainly can do that. And it seems to me that Barack Obama was the first to really do this, because that's where we started to see it happening more and more and more when, there would be forum shopping. People would take a policy to a federal district court judge, a conservative judge in Texas, and he or she would stop the law from being applied across the nation until it was appealed.
Yeah, this has been going on for some time. Now, the Trump people will say, well, look at the stats. We've had way more temporary restraining orders issued against us than Barack Obama or Joe Biden. And I find that a little bit ironic because maybe the issue is they're doing way more things that require temporary restraining orders than the other presidents, right? I mean, we've seen them push the envelopes on a whole host of fronts, not just immigration. We've seen it across the board with the DOGE stuff, with transgender troops, things like that. So yes, there have been more TROs issued against the Trump administration, but that might be because of the acts of the Trump administration. And look, I think in the broad scope here, what we're seeing is a real coming of conflict between the judiciary and the executive branch. Some of the rhetoric that the Trump administration has used attacking judges is stuff we have not seen before, frankly. Now, in the courts, when the lawyers are arguing, they are insistent that they're not going to violate any court order, that they're very respectful. But you can see that the judges themselves are getting incredibly frustrated by the evasiveness of some of the arguments that they're making. And we're only 2 months in. And at some point, people are getting really worried that you will see the administration just say, you know what, we are going to defy this court order, and then we are really in a constitutional crisis.
Coming up, what does $40 million get you these days? For one New York law firm, it was enough to stop a pressure campaign.
The new book, Revenge, the Inside Story of Trump's Return to Power. It's good to see you, Alex. This also seems to be part of that inside story, is what kind of made me think of it. I mean, so many people saw what the Greenland issue as a trolling exercise. But what's the inside story here now?
Well, it feels like it's becoming increasingly serious now, right? The fact that you have the National Security Advisor going, the fact that you have Usha Vance going, which itself is kind of interesting, right? Because now maybe she's going to start to become more of a prominent figure in this administration. But, you know, what's also interesting here is that this is part of this broader annexation effort that you've seen Trump really being fixated on in his second term in office. When you talk about the Gulf of America, when you talk about what he's been doing with Canada. And just as what he's now been doing with Canada, you're now seeing some pushback from Greenland officials on this front.
I'm also thinking what the inside story is coming out of after this weekend. There's an interesting moment from Republican Senator John Curtis, breaking from Elon Musk and his accusations that Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. Curtis did say that Republicans aren't being honest with the American people about this. Let me play this.
We're not being honest when we look people in the eye and say we're not going to touch it. If we don't touch it, it touches itself. You know that, right? That's not being honest with the American people. And I think that's one of the things that makes them not trust us.
And he also said that there's the context to it, Alex, is that, he said that the government needs to assure those in retirement or near retirement that their benefits won't be touched, but that younger people, they need to start that conversation that Social Security is insolvent. How is that going to land inside this White House, do you think?
Well, here's the thing is that the White House has made very clear that that entitlements are off the table. And there's a reason for that. From a political perspective, Republicans who've tried to suggest changes to entitlements in years past have faced severe political blowback. You remember George W. Bush faced blowback for this when he tried it in 2005. Paul Ryan in the early 2010s tried to talk about Social Security reform, faced tremendous blowback. So the White House is acutely aware of this. But now when you have someone like John Curtis going out there and talking about this, talking about making changes, Curtis, by the way, has been outspoken, says he wants to be the tip of the spear in terms of being able to talk about potential reforms to entitlements. It potentially creates an opening for Democrats to run on in next year's midterms.
It's also reminded me of something the Commerce Secretary said last week about also Social Security on a podcast. Let me remind people.
Let's say Social Security didn't send out their checks this month. My mother-in-law, who's 94, she wouldn't call and complain. She just wouldn't. She'd think something got messed up, and she'll get it next month. A fraudster always makes the loudest noise, screaming, yelling, and complaining.
You talked about how the White House has been clear. They say they're not going to touch it. They just want to root out waste, fraud, and abuse from Social Security. But What is the inside scoop when it comes to Lutnick and Trump's return to power?
Right. So Lutnick is a guy who he's ruffled some feathers in Trump world because he has a reputation for going a little bit off message sometimes. And you look at what Democrats could do with that clip is they could send it around, easily use it in TV ads. Why? Because Lutnick himself is a billionaire. Might not be the best look for the Republicans politically to have a billionaire going out and talking about cutting entitlements like that. So it's interesting because Lutnick is a guy who became prominent in Trump world towards the end of the campaign. He showed up at the Madison Square Garden event, appeared with Elon Musk. And ever since then, he's become known as a bit of a bomb thrower on television. You remember that last week he also was on TV and suggested that people buy Tesla stock, which was also sort of surprising.
Yeah, I'd say so. But just the beginning, potentially.
Wildfires in the western part of the state. Mandatory evacuations are in place for parts of Polk County. The fires are each more than 2,000 acres and totally uncontained. The flames have been fueled by weeks of below-average rainfall. Coming up, our next guest was among the few red state Democrats serving in the U.S. Senate. Montana's John Tester joined her.
I just thought I'd come up and check on things.
You live in the States?
Yeah, but I'll always be Canadian.
But you live in the States?
Yeah, so?
Do you remember Mr. Dressup?
The children's show on CBC?
What were the names of Mr. Dressup's two puppet friends?
Casey and Finnegan?
Bud the
Spud?
Howie?
Meeker?
Capital Saskatchewan?
Regina?
Tragically?
Pip?
You're a defenseman defending a 2-on-1. What do you do?
Take away the pass, obviously.
What are the two seasons in Toronto?
Winter and construction.
Wow. You really are Canadian.
Yeah. But let me ask you, Mr. Prime Minister, will there always be a Canada?
There will always be a Canada.
All right. Elbows up.
Elbows up.
I like the elbows up.
Mike Myers making a memorable cameo appearance in a new ad for Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney and his Liberal Party ahead of his country's snap elections on April 28th. Elbows up, and he's right. Play a little hockey. 2-on-1, you're the defenseman. Always take away the pass. The goalie can handle the shot. Welcome to the fourth hour of Morning Joe. It is 6 a.m. out on the West Coast, 9 a.m. here in the East. We have a lot to get to this morning. We will dive right in. Independent Senator Bernie Sanders and Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez have been rallying huge crowds at events across the country. The pair held the latest rally in their Fighting Oligarchy tour in Denver on Friday. Get this, over 34,000 people reportedly in attendance. Big crowd. Their message, which received thunderous cheers, as Democrats as a whole struggle to find their voice in Trump 2.0.
Last week, when other Democrats caved, your senators, Michael Bennet and John Hickenlooper, stood strong against the of office around you and support Democrats who actually fight, because those are the ones that can win against Republicans. But our work here isn't done yet, because you know which Coloradans did vote to gut Medicaid and jack up health care costs? Every single Republican representative from Colorado in the United States Congress. I will say this to those leaders on either side of the aisle who are willing to put their fellow Americans down so that they can get ahead or feel better about themselves, they may best find a home somewhere else. And if you're an LGBT kid or a family, we can't throw you under the bus in order to win an election.
Everybody knows that the current healthcare system is broken, is dysfunctional. Everybody knows that the function of the system today is to make huge profits for the drug companies and the insurance companies. And everybody knows there is something wrong when we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people. So Alexandria and I and others are going to work with you to finally do what should have been done decades ago, pass a Medicare for all single-payer program.
All right, joining us now, we have former Democratic Senator Jon Tester of Montana. He's also co-host of the podcast Grounded with Jon Tester and Maritza Giorgio. And Joe, podcaster, former senator, and you can also add Professor Tester to the list,
Professor
as he's
Tester.
now teaching at University of Chicago.
So professor and podcast, you do everything. I know that as a politician for a long time, you're kind of like me as a politician. When you're driving through at certain times at inflection points, you're just kind of looking around at the towns and communities you're going through and looking at the people and wondering how it's impacting you. I had an experience yesterday. I went with my son to see a spring training game, and we were driving after the game across rural Florida. And I just looked through all these small little towns. I bet 90% of them voted for Donald Trump, and 90% of them have been voting for Republicans for decades. And I'm just looking, and I understand that everybody I'm passing, their primary health care probably comes from a hospital funded by Medicaid. 50% of the kids in those towns, probably in a lot of these towns, 75% of those kids' primary health care provided by Medicaid. I mean, I could go down the list. Vets who served the country honorably, left those small towns, came back to work on farms. They're getting crushed by tariffs. Their VA benefits are getting taken away from them. VA getting slapped. I mean, you go down the list. I mean, this is just a fundamental restructuring, really, of what government has done for rural America and small town America for decades now, isn't it?
100% correct. Look, people are very concerned. Although I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of those same people would still vote for Donald Trump if the election was held today, because the impacts of the cuts of the people that are being laid off around the country, not just Washington D.C., but all over the country, the impacts of that haven't been felt yet. And I think people understand. You talked about Medicare, and you talked about veterans, and you talked about all those kind of things. But the truth is there's even more in the West. There's public lands, and they've laid off people from our Forest Service and BLM and Park Service, and all those things are. It takes people to manage things. I don't care if you're in business or in government, and so. We will see how this goes, but I can tell you that people are very concerned. You just saw the town halls that Bernie had. They had town halls in Montana this weekend. The word I got was 500 and more at those town halls.
So they are perhaps maybe feeling the pinch of what might be coming. I'm just curious with tariffs and your state, I would think that, okay, you're right. I do think it takes a lot for a Trump voter to turn away from Donald Trump. But how long will it take for them to directly feel the impact of some of these tariffs, for example?
Well, it will start as soon as he puts the tariffs on for real. He's put them on and taken them off so many times. Montana depends upon
But doesn't the talk of the tariffs cause prices to go up in some ways?
I think, the uncertainty caused it to go up. Whether it's attributed to the president or not, time will tell. But the truth is that if the tariffs on Canada go in as they say, it's going to have major impacts on the profitability and production agriculture across the country, and particularly in Montana.
They'll be talking about Joe Biden and those tariffs, right? Saying it's his fault.
They will try. So, and we know that President Trump has said April 2nd. Now, just 10 days away will be the day when the next wave, perhaps significant wave, of tariffs come. So let's talk about your old home in the Senate. Obviously, Minority Leader Senator Schumer received quite some criticism in the last 10 days or so about his decision to try to vote to keep the government open. Now, we had him as a guest last week. He explained his rationale, thinking that if it had shut, who's to say the Republicans would ever reopen it and the amount of damage they could do. But some Democrats who even have privately agreed with Schumer say, well, maybe the messaging around it should have been better. What do you think the politics of this should be? What should your former colleagues be saying?
They should be talking about Medicare. They should be talking about Social Security. They should be talking about the programs that are impacting real Americans, and they should have started talking about this continuing resolution 2 months ago, not when the vote happened. I think they were between a rock and a hard place. I don't think there were any good decisions here. I think when I see the video of folks being critical of Democrats, is that really who we should be critical of in this particular case? I mean, let's take a look at who's created the problems that are going on right now, why people are concerned about their democracy, why people are concerned about rising costs and inflation and our standing in the world with our traditional allies, all those things. Focus on those folks and not the people that you're working with. But in the end, I think that people do need to stand up. They need to make sure their voices are heard, because right now Congress is AWOL. And I think that's really, really hurting this country in a big, big way. And until they step up and quit waiting for the courts to act and for Congress to do their job, I think we're going to continue to see uncertainty, and that's bad for the United States, bad for business, bad for our economy, and bad for our standing in the world.
Well, while we're on the topic of Congress returns today after a week-long recess, and Republicans are turning their focus to advancing their party line bill on President Trump's multi-trillion-dollar agenda. Republicans are set to use the budget reconciliation process to push through legislation, which allows them to bypass a 60-vote threshold in the Senate and remove Democrats from their decision-making. But House Speaker Mike Johnson is facing some hurdles to pass the massive bill before the Easter recess. For more, let's bring in NBC News senior national political reporter Sahil Kapoor. Sahil, what more can you tell us?
Hey, Mika. Well, Congress is back today and enters a critical 3-week stretch for President Trump's multi-trillion-dollar agenda of tax cuts and new spending for mass deportations, which, as you just mentioned, Republicans intend to pass along party lines. House Speaker Mike Johnson has indicated he wants to get this huge bill done by Easter. And in a new statement today, Johnson and House leaders say, quote, "Our focus returns to delivering President Trump's full America First agenda." So let's take a look at the 4 key obstacles standing in his way. First, Medicaid cuts. You guys were just talking about this. Some Republicans are downplaying it, but the math doesn't lie. The House budget requires the Energy and Commerce Committee to find $880 billion in savings. But if you set aside Medicare and Medicaid, the entire pot of funding that this committee oversees is $581 billion. In other words, it's mathematically impossible for Republicans to meet their own target without cutting Medicaid. So one of two things has to happen here. Either they make substantial Medicaid cuts and put their swing district members in political peril, swing state members too, or they back off and alienate the conservative hardliners who were promised these cuts. Secondly, the $4.6 trillion asterisk. That's the cost of making Trump's 2017 tax cuts permanent, which expire after this year. It's a huge price tag. So Republicans are trying to use a new accounting technique called the current policy baseline that would set the cost of making them permanent at 0. Now, Democrats are prepared to fight this with a Senate parliamentarian, but nobody knows what the ruling will be, and it will shape whether Republicans can pursue Trump's other plans like ending taxes on tips and overtime pay. Third, House and Senate Republicans are divided on what this bill should look like. They have passed conflicting budgets, but Trump said he prefers the House version, and Johnson today calls on the Senate to pass the House budget. But senators are not convinced. They doubt Johnson can get the votes in his thin majority, and even if he does, some Senate Republicans tell me they plan to pass their own bill and then negotiate it out with the House. Fourth and finally, raising the debt limit. At some point this year, Congress is going to have to act or risk a default on U.S. debt that could be economically catastrophic. House Republicans are targeting a $4 trillion debt limit hike in this bill, but can they get the votes? Hardliners say they want steep spending cuts, so they won't support it, and those savings are already proving to be difficult to find. One way or the other, whatever happens, the outcome of this project carries huge consequences for Trump, for congressional Republicans, and of course for the country. Guys?
All right.
All right, NBC Sahil Kapoor, thank you so much. Senator, it's the nonsense that we hear every day about spending and deficits and balancing budgets and DOGE cuts. Just crazy. And I will just say it here. I speak as a guy that was in the middle of the fight to balance a budget 4 years in a row in Washington, D.C. So understand, it's hard. It takes bipartisan work. And the idea that these DOGE cuts are going to help them pass massive tax cuts for billionaires. It just doesn't add up. The CBO is saying what? They're going to put $20 trillion more onto our $36 trillion debt over the next decade. I don't know not only how conservative members don't vote for this, I don't know how anybody votes for this because it pushes America off the cliff fiscally.
Yeah, that's correct. And if you really want to pay down the debt, you got to make sure your economy's clipping along. And the tariffs, what they're doing to a lot of the agencies is going to do just the opposite. It's going to drive the economy into negative numbers. And keep in mind this, Joe, when President Trump took over this economy, it was the best economy in the world, not by a little bit, by a lot. And to see it start to go down, it's just going to add to the debt. The other thing I would say in regard to the tax bill that's coming up, outside of the fact that they're cutting programs to give tax breaks for the uber rich, is it would be nice, and we're a long ways from this, if Congress started working together in a bipartisan way to get solutions that work for this country. And we're a long ways from that, but the truth is that's how you get good legislation that stands the test of times, with both parties working together, not appealing to the fringes of either side, but working in the middle. That's the way it used to be done in the days of Mike Mansfield.
Yeah, done less frequently these days. Switching gears now, there's a new report from the New York Times that reveals the head of the elite New York law firm that cut a deal with President Trump asserted that he made the agreement because the firm was unlikely to survive a protracted legal fight with the Trump administration. Let's now bring in one of the reporters behind that piece, New York Times investigative reporter Michael Schmidt. Michael, good to see you again. Tell us a little bit more about this important reporting.
So the head of Paul Weiss, and this is the firm that Trump had leveled an executive order against that essentially had crippled the firm's ability to do business, sent a long message to his staff, to his fellow attorneys at his firm on Sunday. And it was the second time since Thursday that he had sent out one of these. And in that message, he tried to explain why was it that he had gone into the Oval Office and made this deal with Donald Trump to end this executive order. He had taken a lot of heat about it in the press and in the legal world for doing this. And that was especially acute because he himself had been such a prominent Democrat. He was someone who raised money for Joe Biden. His firm had helped prepare Kamala Harris for the vice presidential debate, and he himself had tried to harness the powers of the legal community against Donald Trump when he was president during his first term. And in his message was a pretty revealing claim, and that was that even though judges in the federal level, or at least one judge, has said that this executive order is no good, it was too risky for the firm to actually go to court to fight that because they would have lost their clients, that the firm's clients would have thought that the firm was persona non grata with the government, was out of favor with the administration, and it would take its legal work elsewhere. And to me, it showed a remarkable power that Trump has developed in his executive orders, that he was able to get a firm that easily could have gone to court to fight something to instead go to the Oval Office and make a deal with him, a deal in which they committed to giving $40 million in pro bono legal services to causes that Trump himself has championed.
You know, Michael, a couple things. First of all, you are right. I mean, a decision had already come down from a U.S. District Court judge in the D.C. Circuit. So they had the law on their side. They certainly understand that that decision is more than likely to be upheld when it's appealed to the circuit, and even when it's appealed to the United States Supreme Court. They understand that. And this isn't some small fly-by-night operation, as you report. It made $2.63 billion last year. I mean, they have a lot of money. Are there people inside the firm who think that their leadership cut and run too quickly on this and just gave Donald Trump power that he didn't necessarily have.
There was a big divide in the firm between the litigators who wanted to go out and fight this and the corporate lawyers who wanted the firm to reach a settlement and did not want to be seen as adverse to Trump because they thought it could have a negative impact on their clients. And that's where the tension was. And in this firm, the corporate partners are the ones that make more money than the litigators. And there was immense pressure on Brad Karp, the head of this firm, to cut a deal. Going to court to simply fight Trump was not going to be acceptable to the clients who thought that they would be out of favor with Trump because of that. And to me, that's just a stunning fact about the current world and climate that we live in. The things that Trump has done on these executive orders to law firms, the law on them does not appear to be particularly controversial. It doesn't seem like Donald Trump has the power and authority to do the things that he's doing. But nevertheless, this firm saw it as, in its calculation in terms of preserving its bottom line and its client base, it saw it as more making much more sense to reach a settlement. And what the rest of the legal profession will say is, gee, guys, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Brad Karp.
Exactly.
Because Brad Karp had fashioned himself as the face of big law. He had fashioned himself as a big-time Democrat and as the face of big law and someone who was sort of an ambassador, a spokesman for big law. And what he did in cutting that deal showed a sign directly to Donald Trump that if you go out and do this again, there will be other firms that will be forced to come to the Oval Office like Brad Karp and cut a deal like that.
Even when the law was on Brad Karp's side. New York Times investigative reporter Michael Schmidt, thank you so much as always. Senator Tester, I just want to ask you a general question, which politically, I think is something that Democrats are grappling with, and I'm wondering how you would grapple with it as a sitting U.S. senator. You look at the things generally that the White House is doing, right? So you have pictures of people, and they're called Venezuelan gang members, as if every single person in there, including hairstylists and makeup artists, are Venezuelan gang members. And so, but Americans, a lot of Americans don't dig into the minutia of all the news reports. They just see images of what are being called Venezuelan gang members thrown into a tough jail in El Salvador, and a lot of them say, well, that's good. They see Elon Musk going through and cutting, quote, waste, fraud, and abuse in government, and that's certainly the message that he's sending. And if they're not focusing on the specific cuts, they'll go, well, that makes a lot of sense. And I could go down the list of these fights that have been picked. And again, if you're not focused on the details, the actual facts of it, the broad strokes that are being painted are on issues that most Americans would be supportive of. I'm curious, you could say the same thing about USAID. So I'm curious, how would you respond to these actions, and how should Democrats get Americans and voters to focus on what you would consider to be the relevant facts in each of these cases?
Well, there's so many things coming down the pipe every day from the administration. I think you need to pick a few items and go after them. I think things like Social Security and Medicaid, closing down Social Security offices, absolutely is going to really have some devastating effects. I think Democrats need to focus on that kind of stuff. If I was there, of course, I'd be focusing on the impacts of veterans. We passed the PACT Act for toxic exposure. They say they're not going to cut benefits, but the truth is, if you don't have people to deliver the benefits, you have cut those benefits. And so I'd be talking about those kind of things. I'd be talking about things that impact our families every day that they talk about at the kitchen table, because the truth is, folks are too busy out there trying to make a living. They don't spend a lot of time thinking about the minutia. They're just looking at stuff globally. But I would absolutely focus on the kitchen table stuff that people deal with every single day.
Former Democratic Senator Jon Tester of Montana, thank you so much for coming on. Great to see you. And coming up on the White House, where President Trump is set to hold a cabinet meeting this morning at 11 a.m. Eastern. And Elon Musk is expected to attend in what is being described as a follow-up on the last DOGE meeting, which took place on March 6th. We'll be following that. Jonathan Lemire.
Remember, that meeting got pretty heated.
It did. It got
with Secretary Rubio, Duffy, and others
spicy.
Really pushing back against Musk's efforts to cut their personnel.
So we'll be watching that closely.
Certainly will.
Now to a new report in New York Magazine, which argues the remote work experiment is over across businesses in New York City, as companies have been quietly increasing the number of days they require their employees to be in the office. Features writer Andrew Rice explains, quote, office work is not all the way back to what it once was, but the trend is moving in one direction with disorienting speed, without much regard for life or balance. The most extreme return to office mandates can, in some cases, leave employees with less permission to work from home than they enjoyed before the pandemic. And Andrew joins us now. My goodness. So, like, where is this happening? Because I know a lot of people in New York who are working from home, part-time at least.
Yeah, I think that the trend has been across various different sectors. I mean, you've seen it at Amazon, for instance.
Right.
Just this year, told all of its employees to be back 5 days a week. JP Morgan, the investment bank as well. A law firm, Sullivan Cromwell, put out a memo to its associates saying you need to be back in the office 5 days a week, absent exigent circumstances.
Yeah.
So I think that it's not complete, as I said in the article, it's not completely universal yet, but really the trend is all moving towards greater in-office work.
So, Andrew, it's one thing to say workers need to come back to the office, but the other part of that equation is they need to have an office to come back to. And that's part of this tier, right? It's like, talk to us about the situation in New York City post-pandemic. A lot of these office spaces either sit empty or have been converted to apartments. Talk to us about that part of this piece.
Well, there was a kind of a conventional wisdom. I cover a lot of commercial real estate issues. Conventional wisdom you would hear from big office tenants, companies saying, we're never going back to the office full time, around 2021, 2022. And a lot of them made strategic decisions. We're going to downsize our amount of space. We're going to sublease space on the office market. Or sometimes they'd say, we're going to move to a much fancier building, pay more money, but have less space in aggregate. Now they're summoning all their employees back and they're discovering, they're running into the laws of physics. They're discovering that they don't have enough room for everybody.
Where are they?
So Andrew, why are they calling them back? I mean, I've heard CEOs, I've heard managers talk about the fact that remote work just isn't as productive as in-office work. Is that what you heard in this reporting? Why they've gone from saying we're never going to bring everybody back in the office? And I know a lot of CEOs were thinking, hey, this is great. We're going to save office. We're not going to have to pay as much rent, but they're going back on that. Why?
I think it's a variety of things. I mean, I think that studies are showing that workers are actually, that the autonomy has ironically made workers more disengaged from the office. That they're actually showing that they're isolated and feeling more mistrustful of their bosses. They're less interacting with their coworkers and so on. So a lot of employers are trying to address that. Some of them, quite frankly, are using it as a way to force some attrition. They want to cut their workforces, and they find that to be a convenient way to do it. I mean, I say in the story, some of them are kind of unleashing their inner Elons and using these mandates as a way to kind of say, we're going to get rid of the employees who aren't fully on board with our strategy.
That seems to make a lot of sense. I mean, what's wrong with a little balance? It seems like a balanced approach to this would be perfect for the workforce. But, okay, well, the new piece is online now. Features writer at New York Magazine, Andrew Rice. Keep us posted. Sure. Come back. Nice to have you. Also happening here in New York City, former President Joe Biden and former First Lady Jill Biden attended the opening of Othello on Broadway. After the performance, which stars Denzel Washington and Jake Gyllenhaal, the Bidens went backstage to wish the cast and crew a happy opening. Other notable celebrities also in attendance: Jennifer Lopez, Samuel L. Jackson, Spike Lee, Jamie Lee Curtis. This is the first time in 40 years that the Shakespearean play is on Broadway.
President wore a tux for
He
the
wore a
opening.
tux.
Yeah.
Very nice.
The show is certainly receiving a lot of great buzz.
Still ahead on morning.
President Trump expected to convene his cabinet next hour, and attending again, the president's billionaire buddy Elon Musk. Plus, high-stakes hearing, the White House escalating its fight to use a rare wartime law for deportations, taking it to a D.C. appeals court. What to expect this afternoon. Also ahead, AOC and Bernie Sanders drawing massive weekend crowds as Chuck Schumer digs in, the divide over where Democrats go from here. And later, another round of talks to end Russia's war in Ukraine. But is Vladimir Putin serious about peace? Hello, on this Monday, it's 10 Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. I'm Ana Cabrera reporting from New York. Let's get right to that breaking news from the White House, where in 1 hour, President Trump will hold another cabinet meeting. Now, during the first such gathering last month, non-cabinet member Elon Musk famously dominated the proceedings. And we do know the billionaire advisor will be in attendance today. We also know they don't plan to let cameras in this time. Also today, a pivotal court test for President Trump's use of the Alien Enemies Act to deport migrants without due process. Trump administration lawyers will argue in an appeals court that the president can use that rare wartime authority to send alleged gang members to a brutal prison in a country they aren't even from. Let's bring in NBC News White House correspondent Aaron Gilchrist, NBC News reporter Gary Grumbach from our Washington newsroom, and also with us, MSNBC senior contributing editor Michelle Norris. So, Aaron, let's start with the news of this 11 a.m. cabinet meeting. Elon Musk is expected to attend, but we do not expect cameras inside. So is this the White House trying to avoid a repeat of the Elon Musk cabinet show?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know that that's the issue that's at play here. Now, we do know that this is the third cabinet meeting that we're aware of, at least. And in that first meeting, we did see Elon Musk. President Trump turned to him, asked him to talk about the work that he and the DOGE team have been doing. It was the second cabinet meeting that we were aware of that did not include cameras, where you'll remember we had the reporting about Elon Musk and some of the cabinet secretaries, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, Sean Duffy, the Transportation Secretary, and Elon Musk having some tension between them. And so this third meeting, we understand, is supposed to be a follow-up. President Trump indicated on his social media site that he would be having follow-up meetings to talk about the work that the DOGE team is doing, to talk about the reorganization of the federal government that he has ordered through these executive orders. And so our understanding is that will be a key focus of the meeting the president will have today with his cabinet secretaries, most of his cabinet secretaries in the room, Anna.
So, Gary, as they get ready to convene this meeting, Elon Musk's DOGE was just handed another court loss. What can you tell us?
Hey there, Anna. Yeah, this morning a federal judge in Maryland said DOGE and its affiliates must not be able to access sensitive personal information from the Department of Treasury, Department of Education, and the Office of Personnel Management. We're talking information like Social Security numbers, bank records, date of birth, home addresses, income and assets that some of these departments and agencies may have. Now, what this judge said was these DOGE folks don't have to leave the departments. They don't have to stop complete work, but they cannot be accessing this information illegally. And she said, quote, no matter how important or urgent the president's DOGE agenda may be, federal agencies must execute it in accordance with law. She says that likely did not happen in this case. Now, this is something that will very likely be appealed by the Trump administration. Anna.
Gary, you're also covering this afternoon's arguments in the D.C. Court of Appeals over these deportation flights. What are we expecting there?
Yeah, so this sort of goes on two different tracks here. There's the district court case, and then there's the appeals court case, both on the same topic. Just minutes ago in the district court case, Judge Boasberg said he will not vacate his own ruling as the government had requested him to do. So that means that at 1:30 p.m. today, the appeals court will hear the government's plea to vacate the judge's ruling, which had stopped Venezuelan flights from taking off from the U.S., heading to El Salvador under the Alien Enemies Act. This is a hearing where they're going to argue this, and it's going to be really in the weeds. It's going to be pretty a dry legal hearing, but it's, of course, an incredibly important topic. But it's important to note, Judge Boasberg's order did not stop the deportation of Venezuelans outright from this country. Just this weekend, we saw 200 Venezuelans get flown back to Venezuela to the Maduro regime under what they call a repatriation flight that has since been allowed.
And those reportedly had been cases in which there had been at least some adjudication and were not part of this Alien Enemies Act proclamation. Aaron, Attorney General Bondi, though, is talking about this Alien Enemies Act case, looking ahead to the Supreme Court getting involved in this issue. We also learned this weekend that Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem is going to visit the notorious prison in El Salvador where those migrants were sent by President Trump. This is clearly a fight the White House wants to have.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the White House has said as much. We've heard from other members of the administration the same thing, that they believe everything that President Trump has done in these first couple of months of his administration has been legal and proper. All of the executive orders, all the executive actions that have been challenged in courts around the country, really, the Department of Justice has been in court arguing against some of the challenges that we've seen from nonprofit organizations, from unions around the country. And so I think what we heard from the Attorney General over the weekend was that when it comes in particular to this, the Alien Enemies Act that the president has used as a way to deport people that he's alleged are members of gangs, the administration believes this is something that is in their authority, that judges trying to push back on that are really acting on foreign policy issues that are the purview of the president. And so their expectation is that this case will make it to the Supreme Court. And Anna, I think if you look at some of the other cases that are out there as they're going into the appeals process now, we can expect other issues to rise up to the level of the Supreme Court as well in the weeks and months to come.
All right, Aaron Gilchrist and Gary Grumbach, thank you both for the reporting. Michelle, the president keeps on blasting Judge Boasberg in this Alien Enemies Act case, and here was Attorney General Pam Bondi this weekend going after him and other judges by name. Listen.
This is an out-of-control judge, a federal judge trying to control our entire foreign policy, and he cannot do it. Look at Judge Chuckin with the EPA trying to control our money. Judge Chang trying to control the money of the U.S. aid. Judge Reyes, look what she did to Pete Hegseth. She made personal attacks in court about Pete Hegseth, and she's trying to control military readiness. You can't do this. And then, of course, Boasberg trying to control our foreign policy. These judges are out of control.
The posture from the White House is judges can't constrain any executive authority in these cases. So what do you see as the impact of these repeated attacks on the judiciary without any pushback from one party?
The judges, I mean, if you look at the drumbeat of rulings in these cases, the judges do not seem to be intimidated by this. You know, we just heard that the administration is up for the fight. I don't think that the judges necessarily see this as a fight. I think that they see this as them doing their jobs as part of the balance of power in government. There's a larger issue, though, that is at play clearly for the Trump administration, which is to establish absolute executive power. And that's not something that is laid out in our Constitution. That's not something that we've seen. So for the larger American public, there's a bigger issue at stake in terms of our balance of power in our country. In the way that you've seen capitulation in the form of corporate America or law firms or college campuses, you don't expect to see that in the courts. The courts are answering to, as you would say, a different authority here and looking at the rule of law. I don't think we've ever seen an Attorney General of the United States make such a personal attack on judges. There usually is a respect, a camaraderie. Also, like they're on the same team in some respects. But those lines are very fuzzy and very blurry. And on the other hand, you've got judges that are trying to make clear lines of demarcation in terms of the law. And so in each of these cases, there's the case that's at stake, but there's something that's much larger that is at stake, and that is the constitutional issues about the rule of law.
Right. Let's talk about the content of this hearing that's happening today related to deportations to this El Salvadoran prison that's known for human rights abuses. And we have this chilling Time magazine account that was just published over the weekend from a photojournalist who's on the ground there, who was really cataloging the entire intake process from when these detainees arrived last Saturday, a week ago this past Saturday. And he writes this: the intake began with slaps. One young man sobbed when a guard pushed him to the floor. He said, "I am not a gang member. I'm gay. I'm a barber. The reporter then describes the prisoners' heads being shaved, and, quote, the guy who claimed to be a barber began to whimper, folding his hands in prayer as his hair fell. He was slapped. The man asked for his mother, then buried his face in his chained hands and cried as he was slapped again. And, Michelle, the administration's celebrating this kind of optics that were
Well, the reason we
outlined.
know so much about it is exactly that, the optics. The pictures that were beautifully shot. You work in television. You understand the optics that are at work there. Multiple camera shots, shot with very good cameras and very nice lighting. They wanted to send a message to people. They clearly, this is not a camera person that just happened to be there. That was done with quite a bit of forethought. But the two words that we should focus on are due process. You know, this is something you may think, I don't have a gang member in my family. I don't wear tattoos. I don't have fear of being deported. But if you ever were to get caught up in the criminal justice system for something you did, or maybe something that you were mistakenly, you know, that they thought you did and you didn't, you want to make sure that you have due process afforded to you, to your loved ones, to members of your family or your community. And that's where we see a trampling on that idea of due process in this. And so for people who don't think they have something at stake here, this is a very important issue, whether or not you come from Venezuela, whether or not you are presumed to be a gang member. This should be of concern to every American.
The other thing that just strikes me about just how, you know, that picture was painted is this dehumanization, which is not the first time. And you think that's the point, but you also talk about, you know, no due process, there's no transparency about how the administration determined that these people were who they say they are, gang members in their words, or terrorists also is a word that's been thrown out there. Do you see this as a slippery slope?
Well, it is even in the way that they're describing this, that some of the people, the tattoos seem to be evidence of their gang affiliation.
Just tattoos or a T-shirt.
Or
in
someone
one case, we've heard.
who is maybe not in the game, but has affiliated with the gang. Now, this is something that is used, to be fair, in law. I mean, there's asset forfeiture. If you have helped, if you have been involved in criminal activity in any kind of ancillary way, you could be held responsible. You could be seen as an accomplice. But that is usually determined through judicial review, through process, through due process, through the courts. And if you do, this is one of the reasons why I think they're moving swiftly, because they anticipated that there might be speed bumps along the way, and so they moved swiftly to make sure that they could do this without questioning. And so, yes, there is a very slippery slope here.
Michelle Norris, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. Up next, Democratic identity crisis. The fight for the party's future intensifying. Minority Leader Chuck Schumer refusing calls to step aside, while AOC and Bernie Sanders draw massive crowds.
After a number of recent leaks, officials now plan to use polygraphs on employees over at the Defense Department as part of their probe. Let's go live right now to CNN national security correspondent Natasha Bertrand. She's joining us from the Pentagon. What more are you learning, Natasha?
Well, Wolf, the Defense Department was absolutely furious after this New York Times story came out last week saying that Elon Musk was going to be receiving a highly classified briefing on war plans for China here at the Pentagon. And they vehemently denied that that was the case. But just hours after that happened, we saw the DOD put out this memo saying that they are going to be conducting leak investigations and they are going to be using polygraph tests to do so. According to a memo from the DOD's chief of staff, quote, the use of polygraphs in the execution of this investigation will be in accordance with applicable law and policy. And they said that anyone identified as part of this leak investigation is going to be referred for criminal prosecution. Now, this comes as entities across the federal government are beginning to launch these kinds of leak investigations, trying to determine who inside different agencies are speaking to the press. DHS, of course, has started using polygraph tests to determine whether anyone is leaking to the media, as well as DOJ, which issued a very interesting statement over the weekend saying that it would be conducting a leak probe into stories about Tren de Aragua that are, quote, inaccurate but nevertheless classified. Obviously, raising questions here about how you can conduct a leak investigation into something that these entities are saying is also inaccurate, Wolf.
All right, Natasha, thanks very much. Natasha Bertrand over at the Pentagon. There's more breaking news we're following here in the Situation Room. We're learning that President Trump is about to hold a major cabinet meeting, and that is expected in the next hour. I want to go live to our White House reporter, Elena Treen. Elena, what are you learning?
Well, Wolf, I'm told by two Trump administration officials that the president is going to convene his cabinet secretaries here at the White House at 11 a.m. And we have seen in the past with these other cabinet meetings, Elon Musk is expected to attend. Now, we had heard the White House previously say that Musk's presence at these different meetings, which at first raised some eyebrows, given, of course, he is not a cabinet secretary. He's not even a full-time employee. He's a special government employee, as the White House refers to it, that he would be attending these meetings more frequently to check in with the different secretaries about how their efforts to really carry out DOGE's mission, the Department of Government Efficiency, of slashing staff and funding for a lot of these different agencies, to coordinate with him during these meetings. We're going to see that take place today at 11 a.m. Now, of course, there is a lot going on that the Trump administration is facing. A key question is, what are those tariffs on April 2nd that the president has promised? What will those look like? We also know in Saudi Arabia, talks are ongoing with Russia and Ukraine on trying to find a peace deal. All of that, I'm told, likely to come up during this meeting. But as for Musk's part in it, he's going to be checking in with these different secretaries about how their agencies are doing with the overall mission of government efficiency. Wolf?
Do we know, Elena, if the White House is going to allow reporters and camera crews inside to cover that cabinet meeting?
So they have not yet publicly announced this cabinet meeting, Wolf. We were told this by two Trump administration officials. I wouldn't be surprised if they ended it up, opening this up for a select group of reporters to try and ask some questions like we saw with that first cabinet meeting where the president took questions for almost an hour. But that's still unclear. We have to wait for the official announcement from the White House before I think we'll learn more about whether or not media will have access to it.
All right, Elena Treen reporting for us. We'll stay in very close touch with you. Thank you very much. Still ahead, a new lawsuit is looking to
protect its citizens. Secretary of State Marco Rubio had threatened new sanctions if the country's government refused them. The Trump administration's push to deport non-citizens under an 18th century law will return to a courtroom today. On Face the Nation, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz railed against a federal judge blocking the deportations. Listen.
We are saying that TDA is acting as a proxy of the Maduro regime. This is how the Alien and Sedition Act applies. And we cannot have district judges interfering with the commander-in-chief's actions to take care of, in the way he deems necessary, a terrorist organization.
Let's bring in CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe with more on this. Ed, what is the White House saying about this appeals court hearing today?
Well, the White House continues to appeal the decision by the federal district judge here in Washington, arguing that the president was within his rights to use this law because, in their view of the administration, this violent gang out of Venezuela, Tren de Agua, is violent and is, in essence, trying to stoke violence and chaos here in the United States. The interpretation of that law is ultimately at the heart of this, and the Attorney General said on Sunday on another Sunday morning program that she anticipates that this fight will go all the way to the Supreme Court, which it seems the White House is hoping for, to get some clarity on what exactly a president can do with this law, if anything, regarding immigration. So that fight will resume today. Remember, this judge has been pushing the administration for more details on who exactly was sent on those flights, how many more people in this country could conceivably be sent away by using that law, and other details, operational details of the decision to send those flights. So far, the administration's been dragging its feet on sharing some of those details, Harold.
And Ed, there are some new reports that the IRS is now helping the Department of Homeland Security with immigration enforcement. What do we know about that?
It's nearing an agreement with the Homeland Security Department to share the tax information of people believed to be in this country illegally. Now, normally, your tax information is protected by the IRS for security and privacy concerns, and in limited circumstances, it can be shared with law enforcement. Not normally, though, for immigration enforcement. And so there's been an ongoing talks between the IRS and DHS about allowing the Homeland Security Secretary or other top officials to request specific names. So long as they have the names and the addresses of these people, the IRS could pull it out of their database and share it. It'll undoubtedly be challenged in court. Again, another legal fight that the administration is welcoming. But the argument they're making is, look, if one agency has this information on these people, why wouldn't we necessarily share it with Homeland Security if they're here illegally? The issue, though, is undocumented immigrants for decades have been paying into the Social Security system and other payroll taxes in order to prove, eventually, should they get a chance to either get a green card or become a citizen, that they were participating in the system and following the rules despite coming here illegally. It's another big legal challenge to come. Errol.
All right. With the latest from the White House, that's Ed O'Keefe. Ed, thanks.
President John F. Kennedy. While the documents have revealed few new revelations on the assassination, the unredacted files are filled with details about covert CIA operations around the world, from the Vatican to Latin America. One document revealed 47% of political officers working in overseas U.S. embassies in 1961 were actually intelligence agents working under diplomatic cover. At the U.S. Embassy in France, the CIA had 123 undercover agents acting as diplomats. The documents also shed new light on CIA activity across Latin America, including in Cuba, the Dominican Republic, and Bolivia. Those are just some of the revelations highlighted by the National Security Archive, an independent organization that's been reviewing the documents. We're joined now by Peter Kornblue, senior analyst for Latin America at the National Security Archive. He's researched CIA operations for decades with a focus on Latin America. His books include Back Channel to Cuba, The Hidden History of Negotiations Between Washington and Havana, and Bay of Pigs Declassified, the secret CIA report on the invasion of Cuba. He's joining us now from Wellfleet, Massachusetts. Peter, welcome back to Democracy Now! What's in these tens of thousands of pages of documents that you're continuing to plow through?
Well, we don't have enough time to talk about all the details of the early 1960s history of the CIA kind of global effort to influence elections, sabotage economies, overthrow governments. But we've learned a lot more of the minutia, of the granular kind of side of these covert operations, names, places, shell companies, expenditures, so many little details that really complete, I think, in many ways, our sense of the universe of covert operations and what they targeted, how they happened, how they, were organized. I mean, it's fascinating from a historical point of view. The U.S. taxpayer, Amy, has shelled out a lot of money for decades now to have these documents kept secure and clean in the vaults of the national security agencies of the U.S. government. And now finally we are accessing this history that we paid for, that we've paid we paid for it to happen. We financed the CIA with our money way back when, and now at least we know what was being done in our name, but without our knowledge.
So you write that on the day President Kennedy's inauguration in January '61, nearly half of the political officers serving in the U.S. embassies were CAS, C-A-S, intelligence officers working under diplomatic cover known as Controlled American Sources. What's the significance of this, Peter?
Well, simply the significance is that whereas most people thought these were actually State Department officials in U.S. embassies around the world, almost half the people in these embassies, particularly using the office that was called political officer, were CIA undercover agents. It's pretty incredible. As Arthur Schlesinger pointed out in this extraordinary memo that's been completely declassified now to John F. Kennedy on June 10th, 1961, 3,700 officers around the world were CIA officials under diplomatic cover, in comparison to 3,900 of actual diplomats around the world. So it was almost 50%, and that's quite an extraordinary number. And I think a number of countries will be surprised at the kind of level of to which the U.S. embassies were being used as cover for the CIA. Again, this is all in the past. It's old history. We've known for many years that political officers were often used to kind of disguise CIA operations. And there were other parts of the embassies too, the labor attaches, the commercial attaches, et cetera. And then there were the CIA officers that were operating in countries like Chile and Bolivia and Brazil and elsewhere who weren't in the embassies at all. But it's a tidbit of covert operations history that certainly is dramatic and reminds us of what the United States was doing around the world and is capable of doing in the future.
In light of the U.S. cracking down even more on Cuba right now, especially young people may not know how many assassination attempts there were against Fidel Castro. Is it in the range of 600? And then I want to follow that up with a question about one of the JFK assassination documents being released about the Inspector General's report of the 61 successful, if you call it that, assassination of Rafael Trujillo of the Dominican Republic, revealing the names of CIA officers and others who assisted in the plot. Can you talk about this?
Well, the 600 or so figure about assassination attempts on Fidel Castro comes more from Cuban intelligence than from U.S. intelligence. Every attempt by any exile group that the Cuban intelligence intercepted or learned about was added up, and those were quite a few. The CIA itself counts about 16 earnest CIA-sponsored attempts, which now have become folklore of covert operations history, exploding seashells, poisoned cigars, sniper rifles, et cetera. So, we've known about those assassination plots for a long time. There is one document, an internal CIA Inspector General's report on the assassination in late May of 1961 of Rafael Trujillo, the dictator of the Dominican Republic. And it's quite detailed. It names the names of all the CIA officers involved, including their code names that they used in their discussions with coup plotters and the assassination team in the Dominican Republic. It names all the names of the coup plotters as well that the CIA was working with, the name of the actual covert operation, which was called EMD, and the actual assassination plot, which was called EM Slew. So there are a lot of details on that history, and you get to learn not only how the CIA works with foreigners to assassinate a head of state, in this case, the dictator Rafael Trujillo, but you also learn how the CIA goes about investigating its own wrongdoing of the past, the files that it keeps, how they are reviewed, what they yield, et cetera. So it's quite fascinating from a historical point of view.
We've done a lot on USAID and Trump's essentially shuttering the agency. You've covered foreign policy in Latin America for decades. Can you talk about the story of the USAID's Office of Public Safety?
That's, again, part of the folklore of covert operations. There was a famous movie made about Dan Mitrione, and who was an officer in the Office of Public Safety. It was never completely proven that he was a CIA official. He was kidnapped and executed in Uruguay by the Tupamaros. Became a very famous case. There is evidence in these declassified documents that the CIA did use AID as cover. But, that was a long time ago. And even if it was doing that, there's still quite a bit more to USAID than CIA covert operations. And so when we talk about AID being shuttered today, we're talking about programs that were literally saving lives every day, providing food bought from U.S. farmers, by the way, by the federal government, and food, medicine, vaccines, quite a bit of support to many of the causes that we actually care about. So it's easy to look back on the older history of USAID when it was first started as a tool of the Cold War. The Cold War has been over for a long time now, so closing it down now is simply a crime against humanity, frankly, in my opinion, because so many people will die and suffer and become ill and impoverished by this cruel act of simply closing the doors of the USAID programs.
Peter Kornbluh, the New York Times, reports a senior official at the main U.S. aid agency, which is being dismantled by Trump, told employees to clear safes holding classified documents and personnel files by shredding the papers or putting them into bags for burning, according to an email sent to the staff. The significance of this, you as an archivist who deeply wants to understand what is happening and has happened in the past.
Well, there is a Federal Records Protection Act, a law that prevents documents from just being wantonly destroyed, erased, shredded, burned, as this email that you refer to indicated. And so that was very alarming when that news broke and that email was shared with the kind of legal community. It also spoke to the issue of whether these documents might have been relevant in the ongoing lawsuits, the legal pushback by AID employees to save their jobs and save their institution. Legal efforts that are underway right now, and those documents might have actually been relevant to those legal efforts. You know, my organization joined in protesting that action. It was the subject of court discussion. We don't know, we don't have an index of what documents were actually shredded that day and burned that day, but hopefully at some point we will. But that speaks to a different issue, Amy, that I hope we want to raise before we go, which is, you know, part of what's important about the declassification of the John F. Kennedy documents is not just what's in the documents. It is the law that mandated that declassification, which is known as the JFK Act and passed in 1992. And it was a law that's probably the strongest law on declassification that's ever been written. It created an independent panel outside of the national security agencies to oversee the declassification of the documents. It mandated that, with very few exceptions, the documents be released without censorship, without redactions. And this is a law that really is very important. Now that it's been fully implemented by, ironically, Donald Trump, you know, it's a law that creates a new standard and a new precedence for openness and transparency. And it's very important that now that we have that standard, we apply that standard to the very administration that is in power today. And it's interesting that while he's released the JFK files, the Shabazz family is asking for the release of the Malcolm X files, which he has yet to do. Peter Kornbluh, in the last 30 seconds, I want to get your response to President Trump basically also shuttering Voice of America and Radio Marti, particularly the news, if you could call it that agency, that was broadcasting into Cuba U.S. propaganda. Well, he has shuttered the Cuba programs. USAID had Cuba democracy programs, which were very objectionable to the Cubans. Those are gone now. Radio Marti, TV Marti, gone now. That does not mean that Trump is not going to be pressuring Cuba in other ways. But at least the Cuba programs are gone. People who look closely at the Voice of America will know that they've used our documents in many stories that they've done. They, too, are not the Cold War product that they once were.
An Israeli airstrike targets the largest hospital in southern Gaza, killing 2 people, including a senior Hamas political leader. I'm Tom McRae. This is Al Jazeera live from Doha. Also coming up, South Korea's acting President Han Duck-seo is reinstated after the Constitutional Court dismisses his impeachment. Canada's Prime Minister calls early elections, seeking a mandate to address growing tensions with the Trump administration. Plus,
I'm Barnaby Lowe in Cambodia, where media watchdogs warn U.S. President Donald Trump's scrutiny of USAID could further endanger independent journalists.
An Israeli airstrike on southern Gaza's largest hospital has killed at least 2 people, one of them a senior Hamas official. An AlJazeera correspondent was waiting to go live when the medical complex was hit. The attack targeted the surgical building of Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, destroying the 2nd floor. Hamas says Ismail Wahoum, a member of its political bureau, was undergoing treatment when he was killed. A 16-year-old boy was also killed and several other people injured. Hind Qadri reports from Dar al-Bala in central Gaza.
Ismail Barhoum was injured and he was receiving treatment in the hospital. According to Al-Nasr hospital doctors, they said that the department that was hit is out of service because of the destruction caused by the Israeli airstrike. Now, doctors are saying that this is unacceptable and there is no way or no justification of targeting a hospital. Now, hospitals in the Gaza Strip are running out of supplies, are running out of it's a chronic medical shortage because the Israeli authorities have been closing the Kerem Abu Salem for 3 weeks now, where no trucks have been entering, no medical supplies and nothing. But it's also escalating in different parts across the Gaza Strip, in Beit Lahia, in Beit Hanun, in the northern Gaza Strip, and also in the southern Gaza Strip in Rafah, where the Israeli forces have been launching endless artillery shelling airstrikes and also forcing Palestinians to evacuate the area. And it's not only the continuous bombardment, but it's also the humanitarian crisis where Palestinians are unable to secure their daily meals because there has been no food. The situation is also alarming in hospitals, where hospitals in the Gaza Strip are also calling for blood units because they're very short on medical supplies.
Dr. Feroz Sidwa is a trauma surgeon and was in Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis when it was bombed. He says there is no justification for attacking medical facilities.
Benjamin Netanyahu has been ill recently. Well, he stands accused of genocide. And nobody thinks Hamas can bomb a hospital just because Benjamin Netanyahu happens to go there. That's crazy. This is completely insane. You don't bomb hospitals. Everybody knows that. It's part of this, the oldest part of international law. You know, the first Geneva Convention was signed in 1864, and that was the first creation of international law, at least in the West. And it's specifically about not obstructing the work of physicians and nurses. This is barbarity. This isn't how reasonable, civilized people behave. It doesn't matter what they were trying to do. You don't bomb a hospital no matter what. That's not how it works. The ward is destroyed. It does not exist anymore. It will have to be completely rebuilt. The whole hospital smells like smoke right now, but the ward is the entire electrical system was destroyed. Every door is blown off its hinges. Most of the windows are shattered. The ceiling is collapsed. So it's completely unusable. It's going to have to be all torn out and redone. You know, that's not the area where we do surgery. Thankfully, that's the 4th floor operating room. So we can continue to provide surgical services, but that destroyed, I couldn't tell you, probably 30 beds in this hospital, and the hospital is already being overwhelmed by casualties. So the fewer beds we have, the less care we're able to provide.
The health ministry in Gaza says Israeli attacks have killed more than 50,000 Palestinians since October 2023. More than 11,000 are unaccounted for, many buried under the rubble. Israel resumed its bombardment of Gaza on Tuesday, breaking the ceasefire it agreed with Hamas in January. In less than a week, it's killed more than 670 people. Tarek Abu Azum has more.
Born only hours ago, already with big shoes to fill, baby Muhammad was named after his brother who was killed by Israel's bombardment last year. He was only 4 years old. More than 50,000 people have now been killed since the Israeli assault began on October the 7th, 2023. But that number is only those who have been identified. The real death toll is likely to be much higher. In February, the government media office revised its tally, saying the more than 11,000 Palestinians who were missing are now presumed dead. Muhammad's mother is hoping and praying her new son will have a better chance at life.
He was the one who made me a mother. My new baby is my gift from God, but no one will ever replace my son. My wish now is to stay alive and be able to see my children grow up.
This is a war on women and children. The UN says they make up 70% of the Palestinians injured or killed. After a fragile ceasefire that had lasted nearly 2 months, Israel resumed its offensive on Gaza last Tuesday. Child rights groups described that day as one of the deadliest for children in Gaza's history.
We the people are not guilty. What crime have we done to lose 50,000 martyrs and 11,000 are missing? What have we done? We struggled a lot. We want to rest. We want to stay in our country. We want comfort.
With little to no medical care, a shortage of food and a lack of basic supplies, people here have more than just Israeli bombardment to fear. Palestinians say death comes too easily, too quickly. And what's difficult is a proper burial. Families who sought refuge together now share one coffin, one graveyard, if they can find space.
The death toll keeps mounting, but for every family, one loss is one too many. Many remain under the rubble, many are still missing, and many confront death with each passing moment. Tariq Abazoum, AlJazeera, Deir el-Balah, Palestine.
Thousands of Israelis marched towards Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office in West Jerusalem, demanding he return to the Gaza ceasefire deal. They're also rallying against the government's decision to dismiss the chief of the Internal Security Agency, Shin Bet, and the Attorney General, saying it erodes democratic rights. Hamda Salut has more.
Violence outside of the Israeli Prime Minister's home as police use force and battle with Israelis protesting against their leadership. They're demonstrating against a series of decisions made by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government. Among the biggest issues, Israel's decision to break the ceasefire and return to fighting in Gaza. A move that family members of Israeli captives say abandons their loved ones still held in the Strip.
I watch my country just continuing a non-ending war with hostages not being released for almost 2 years now, and they're my age, and I'm worried for the future of this country. And I think it has to stop. We have to change direction.
On Sunday morning, tens of thousands of people took to the streets in West Jerusalem outside of the Israeli parliament to voice their concerns about the coalition's move to fire Israel's security chief, Shin Bet head Ronen Bar, and the effort to push out Israel's attorney general after a vote of no confidence against her passed unanimously within Netanyahu's cabinet. Israelis say measures like these put the country's democracy at risk.
I'm here to stay to make it clear to the Israeli government that their actions to ruin the Israeli democracy and leave the hostages in Gaza will not pass.
On Saturday night, thousands of Israelis turned out in Tel Aviv for what's described as the biggest protest in recent months. It was the first of the weekly demonstrations against the government since its decision to renounce the ceasefire and return to its bombing campaign.
Ban on public gatherings for the fifth night in a row. Police fired tear gas and water cannon at protesters. Anger is growing after a court ordered Istanbul's Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu be formally arrested and jailed ahead of his trial on charges of corruption. İmamoğlu denies the accusations. Supporters say his arrest is part of a smear campaign. Axel Zaimovic was at the protests in Istanbul, where police faced off with demonstrators.
This is the largest police presence we've seen in these Istanbul protests that were brought in from across the city, but also nearby regions. Authorities say that this massive security presence is needed to maintain public order. Violence broke out at some point throughout the night. Protesters were firing flares and throwing bottles. Police have responded with tear gas and water cannons. Police just pushed forward against the crowd and people started running away. They scattered quickly, and we have seen officers beating protesters. Even some journalists have been targeted in this action. One cameraman told us that police approached him, they ripped his gas mask off and pepper sprayed him.
They threw me to the ground, and about 6 policemen began kicking me. I told them I was a member of the press. I said I was doing my job. But regardless, they were furious. They attacked me recklessly.
Dozens of people have complained about injuries sustained from police, and they see this as an overreaction. This comes after Imamoglu's party leader called for extended demonstrations, not just here in Istanbul, but across all Turkey. And this will likely increase tensions. Axel Zaimovic, Al Jazeera.
Ukrainian officials are expected to meet their US counterparts again on Monday for ceasefire talks in the Saudi capital, Riyadh. Ukrainian Defense Minister Rustem Umerov called discussions on Sunday constructive and meaningful. US officials hope a temporary ceasefire can turn into a lasting peace deal. A Russian delegation is set to arrive in Riyadh on Monday. The talks come amid ongoing hostilities between Russia and Ukraine. Russia says it intercepted and destroyed 28 Ukrainian drones overnight on Sunday. Most of them were downed over the Russia's border Kursk region and the southern Rostov region. Ukrainian officials reported that at least 10 people were killed across the country on Sunday, and more than 150 Russian drones were launched. Asad Baig has more.
Gunfire and explosions across the Ukrainian capital Kyiv as air defense units try to intercept Russian drones. Searching the night sky with a distinct sound of buzzing. Some made it through, others fell on residential buildings, leaving firefighters to tackle the blazes. Several people were killed in Kyiv, including a father and his 5-year-old daughter, and an elderly woman.
She was around 80 years old. She had not yet retired. The security company could not open the door to her apartment. The door got stuck and she was burned alive inside. It's horrible, but this is what war is.
As residents try to clean up, Ukrainian negotiators are in Saudi Arabia for talks on a possible ceasefire.
Described Saturday night's attack as massive, adding that a father and his 5-year-old daughter are among those that lost their lives. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky estimates that Russia sent roughly 150 drones to attack Ukrainian targets overnight. This is certainly an unwelcome backdrop to these technical talks between US and Ukrainian delegations meeting in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia later on Sunday.
Long-range missiles. The project is the president's attempt to rebrand vague plans for developing a missile defense system similar to Israel's Iron Dome. Sources say the plan would likely cost billions of dollars to build and maintain, and comes as the Pentagon is looking to cut the budget. CNN's Zachary Cohen is one of the CNN reporters who broke this story. Zach, I mean, what is the Pentagon saying about the realities here?
Yeah, Fred, that's really the big question for Pentagon officials, who have until next week to present their plan for how to implement and develop this Golden Dome system that Donald Trump has insisted the U.S. needs to protect it from long-range missile threats. But I'm told that right now the reality is that Golden Dome remains just an idea and that discussions about it are purely conceptual. But even in this early stage of the planning process, one consensus has emerged, and it's that any U.S. system like what Donald Trump is talking about will look nothing like Israel's Iron Dome system, what Trump has compared the Golden Dome that he's proposing to. And that's in part because of just the stark difference in size between the two countries. Israel is about the size of New Jersey, and obviously the United States much larger, which means it's much more difficult to protect the entire country from these kind of ballistic missiles, these hypersonic missiles that Donald Trump envisions the Golden Dome protecting the U.S. from. But look, still, officials are actively engaged in discussions about how to turn that dream, Donald Trump's dream of a Golden Dome system, into a reality. This system would require really a space-based missile system. It's something that would require thousands of satellites. It would require interceptors, space-based interceptors. And even then, though, current and former officials I talked to say that it's up in the air as to whether or not that kind of system would even work, despite the fact that it would likely cost billions of dollars a year. So really, this is something officials are wrestling with ahead of the deadline to present the plan to Donald Trump next week.
Oh, and then what are officials saying about how our adversaries might view this?
So that's the other major consideration here for Pentagon officials that are working on this issue. How will U.S. adversaries respond? And one idea is that they'll likely ramp up their own production of ballistic missiles, offensive ballistic missiles, to try to keep the advantage over the United States as it pours money into the Golden Dome defensive system. This is something that could create a money problem. That's what former officials tell us, that offensive ballistic missiles are much cheaper to produce than the interceptors required in this idea of a Golden Dome system. They're also worried that potentially the Golden Dome and the idea of a Golden Dome could make Russia and China less confident in the current stability that exists in the nuclear deterrence, basically mutually assured destruction with the U.S. It's what protects the U.S. from being targeted with a nuclear weapon. So a lot of questions on that side as well.
All right. Zach Cohen, thanks so much. All right, in a moment, a man survives being trapped in how much they are worth because many of them are classified. The New York Times reports that SpaceX is being paid to build military satellites to, quote, try to confront rising military threats from China, which makes today's meeting and today's reporting, which they are furiously denying, even if war plans were not.
Continue to spread and continue to mutate, potentially into a strain that could prove far more dangerous to humans than we're seeing right now.
So there is that, the potential mutation, but overall, the larger impact of bird flu across the country right now is what? And how does this strain compare to those in the past?
Sure. So this has been absolutely devastating to the U.S. poultry industry, first and foremost. About 167 million birds have been affected since 2022. That has been a huge financial blow to poultry farmers. The federal government does not compensate farmers for birds who already died before federal officials arrive. They don't compensate for lost revenue. For Cockadoodle Farm, this Illinois farm that I visited just the other week, that meant $100,000 in lost revenue that they are not getting back. So it has really been both financially and also emotionally, psychologically, very devastating for American farmers across the country.
Oh, you can imagine. I mean, seeing all their birds just die, just looking at it, some of them have to euthanize them. It's got to be horrible. But I'm curious what the CDC has reported, 1 human death from bird flu. But give me a sense of how risky this disease is for people. And then building off that, are health officials concerned this could turn into another pandemic?
Sure. So right now, public health experts, including the CDC, agree that the risk to humans is low. As you mentioned, there are 70 known cases, confirmed cases of humans who contracted bird flu in the U.S. Most of those cases involve humans like farm workers who have close contact with infected animals. But yes, the concern is that as this virus continues to spread and continues to jump, not just, it's moved from poultry and now to cattle, to cats, to rats, to zoo animals. Every time it kind of moves to a new kind of species, it's another opportunity for the virus to mutate and potentially, yes, end up in a strain that could be more easily transmissible between humans and more deadly. And that would set the stage for a pandemic that's a situation that everyone would want to avoid.
Everyone's worried about that as well, $12 a carton for eggs right now. Anyway, Susie Kim, thank you so much. And that's going to do it for me on this edition of Alex Witt Reports. I'll be back tomorrow at 1 p.m.
For the low, low price of $277 million, you too can gain special access to the country's national security apparatus. Extraordinary blockbuster new reporting in the New York Times reveals that Donald Trump's biggest donor and de facto wingman / co-president, Elon Musk, had been set to get a briefing on the U.S. military's plans for any possible conflict with China. Given that Elon Musk has extensive business interests in China and is the head of a major defense contractor, SpaceX, it is both a tremendous conflict of interest and a potential national security risk all rolled into one. This morning, Elon Musk arrived at the Pentagon. He was greeted by the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseths. Now, what happens next gets a little murky.
Since that reporting first broke, Team Trump has repeatedly and furiously denied that Elon Musk would be briefed on war plans. Pete Hegseths told reporters in the Oval Office today this, quote, "It was a great informal conversation. The rest of that reporting was fake. There were no war plans. There was no Chinese war plans. There was no secret plans," end quote. That's what they say. Now, that Hegseths did not say if China came up in their conversations today. Here's what the reporting said. Two U.S. officials telling the New York Times this, quote, "The Pentagon was scheduled on Friday to brief Elon Musk on the U.S. military's plan for any war that might break out with China," end quote. Should be no surprise to anyone that war plans are as closely guarded as anything. Times goes on to report this, quote, "If a foreign country were to learn how the United States planned to fight a war against them, it could reinforce its defenses and address its weaknesses, making the plans far less likely to succeed. The top secret briefing that exists for the China war plan has about 20 to 30 slides that lay out how the United States would fight such a conflict. It covers the plan beginning with the indications and warning of a threat from China to various options on what Chinese targets to hit over what time period that would be presented to Mr. Trump for decisions, according to officials with knowledge of the plan. Now, Musk does have a security clearance, but he is not in the military chain of command.
Kristen, I knew when I cast my vote against against the government shutdown that there'd be a lot of controversy, and there was. But let me tell you and your audience why I did it, why I felt it was so important. The CR was certainly bad, you know, the continuing resolution, but a shutdown would be 15 or 20 times worse.
Schumer has faced a barrage of criticism from Democrats since providing that key vote in advancing the Republican spending plan to keep the government from shutting down. CNN's Eva McCann is in Washington. Eva, has Schumer lost the confidence of his party, even though he remains pretty defiant and confident that he is the right man for the job?
Fred, it's hard to say definitively at this point. What we do know from speaking to Democratic voters, as I have all across the country, is there is deep disappointment with Schumer and Democratic leadership more broadly. Our own CNN poll, for instance, last month found nearly three-quarters, 73% of Democratic voters say the party's caucus in Congress is doing too little to oppose President Trump. And when I speak to organizers in left-leaning groups, they tell me the hope is that voters pressure their own senators on the Schumer question, and then ultimately that pressure transfers to the caucus, turning on him essentially, and him stepping aside. You heard, for instance, Colorado Senator Michael Bennet say recently, it's important for people to know when it's time to go. Here's how one Democratic House member is thinking about this moment.
What I do know is that it was not a good look for the two congressional Democratic leaders to be on opposite sides of the continuing resolution. That created a great deal of agita out there, and legitimately so. So I am quite certain that Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer have learned from this experience and are going to, at a minimum, be unified going forward here.
And so in the wake of all of this, Schumer remains defiant and maintains the country is in a constitutional crisis. The big question now is, will he change his strategy as a result of the criticism he's received, Fred, from all corners?
Okay. Eva McCann in Washington, thanks so much. Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader in the House, is also facing growing unrest from members within his own caucus. CNN's Manu Raju explains.
You know, Democrats are struggling with their way forward. They're trying to figure out what their strategy is as they try to battle Donald Trump, as they hear all of these voter concerns, their own voters saying that they are simply not doing enough to push back against Donald Trump. Of course, this was exacerbated in the aftermath of their handling of a Republican spending bill to keep the government open. Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader on the Senate side, ultimately agreed to let that GOP bill pass. That prompted days of back and forth and attacks directed towards Chuck Schumer from Democrats Democrats. And now we are hearing that a lot of House Democrats want their leader of their caucus, Hakeem Jeffries, to take the reins back from Chuck Schumer and really lead the party's charge out of the minority, try to lay out a vision, what they consider a badly needed vision for a party facing a crisis of confidence, from not just voters showing on both sides of the aisle showing concerns about the Democratic brand, concerns about the direction of the party, but their own voters themselves. Poll after poll showing that they believe the party is headed in the wrong direction. But Democrats want Jeffries to help bring them out of the morass. One of the things that we are hearing, my colleague Sarah Ferris and I, about the push by some Democratic members to actually lay out a policy vision, a blueprint for how they could retake the House next year, come up with a number of proposals that the party could all unite behind. That could be a lot easier said than done. This is a party that is not on the same page about what they actually agree on some matters, but also on how to push back against Donald Trump, whether to fight him on everything, whether they should have gone down a government shutdown route that could have occurred by mid-March and could have went on for some time, or whether they should stand firm and let Donald Trump battle him on pretty much everything and try to shift the focus back towards Donald Trump. These are strategic decisions, have been debated for the past several months, but Democrats have been unable to come up with a single solution on how to push back against Donald Trump. So that's going to be one of the urgent matters to discuss as they return to Washington this week. One of the big focuses for Democrats in this next phase of battling Donald Trump is how to push back against the Trump agenda. There's a massive bill that Republicans are trying to put together on major tax overhauls, significant spending cuts, immigration policy, energy policy. Republicans are trying to wrap this up into one massive bill. Democrats are trying to figure out their strategy to push back against this. They, of course, want to focus on the issue of cuts to entitlement programs like Medicaid cuts. Republicans say that's not going to be part of the equation. Democrats say it absolutely will be. Watch that to be one area of unity for Democrats going forward. That is something that Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries discussed on a private call just days ago in the aftermath of their flap over the government funding fight. But there will be other points of leverage that they got to figure out. There's going to be another battle to fund the federal government in the fall. That's months away, but that's something that'll come up rather quickly. And also how to raise the national debt limit. Republicans are trying to do it on their own, through their own process, but Democrats may be forced to be called on to help lift the national debt limit. How do they use their leverage in that case as well to avoid a debt default, but also get what Donald Trump to heed to their demands? All key questions that Hakeem Jeffries is facing at this moment. And one thing that we heard from our reporting is that Nancy Pelosi, the former House Speaker, had a suggestion for Jeffries. She told him to, quote, use your power. In other words, if Chuck Schumer is going a different way, use your power, your leverage to try to be the one pushing ahead on the Democratic agenda, sharpening your message, sharpening your strategy. Don't play second fiddle to Senate Democrats. Manu Raju, CNN, Washington.
All right, just ahead, jubilation in Rome and around the world as Pope Francis emerges from his long stay in the hospital to return to his home at the Vatican. What happens next in his recovery? And later, we'll share an amazing story of a pro athlete turned mom, turned cancer survivor, turned serious inspiration. See how Kimi Fasani's journey has become an inspiration, a real source for so many.
The Whole Story with Anderson Cooper is a 5-time Emmy winner for long-form journalism. This week, Bill Weir looks at climate change and some of the revolutionary ideas for weathering it. The Whole Story with Anderson Cooper, tonight at 8 on CNN.
Stuck paying off your phone, but want a new one? Break up with your carrier. We've got you. Switch to Verizon, and we'll give you up to $800 to pay off your phone. And you'll get a new iPhone. That's iPhone 16 Pro with Apple Intelligence on us, on any plan. Now with Genmoji. Only on Verizon.
What's he like? The happy-faced killer?
You mean my dad? Be glad you never have to know.
You think that you're so much better than me. You were just like your old man.
I'm not like you at all.
I feel like
feel like taking chances. I feel alive. Brand new.
Learn more about Celebrity Cruises' latest offers.
Thinking of updating my kitchen? Yeah? Yes. This year, we are finally updating our kitchen. Doing subway tile and an ivory or eggshell. Cream, maybe bone. Don't get me started on quartz. Big island. You ever heard of a waterfall count?
For everyone who talks about doing that thing,
over there,
but never does that thing,
sweet little breakfast nook.
Chase has financial guidance.
See how you can start saving to make this happen. Really?
Really?
Really.
At home or in
You
person.
could also check out a Chase Money Skills workshop.
That's guidance from Chase. Make more of what's yours.
Okay, Noah's gonna make a fire. Our job is to let him do it by himself.
Yeah, you're gonna want a wider base here.
He just started.
Progressive can't protect you from becoming your parents.
Here, let me just
But we can protect your home and auto when you bundle with us.
Our remodels are made to look beautiful and made to last.
So we hand-selected products that are stylish and durable to create new designs for your bathroom. See them now at rebath.com.
So what do you think about these?
We're going to take everything down to the stud.
From design and products to removal and installation,
Turned out amazing.
Rebath is with you through every step of your remodel. Call or visit rebath.com for your free in-home design consultation.
Welcome to the Now Way to Network. They switched to Juniper's AI native network so they can take their game to a whole new level. That's the Now Way to Network at work with real AI, letting you rise above it all.
Ever feel like a spectator in your own life with chronic migraine? 15 or more headache days a month, each lasting 4 hours or more. Botox prevents headaches in adults with chronic migraine. In a survey, 91% of users wish they'd started sooner. So why wait? Talk to your doctor.
Botox effects may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away, as trouble swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness can be signs of a life-threatening condition. Those with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Side effects may include allergic reactions like rash, breathing problems, dizziness, neck and injection site pain, and headache. Don't receive Botox if there's a skin infection. Tell your doctor your medical history, muscle or nerve conditions like ALS, myasthenia gravis or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medicines like botulinum toxins, which may increase the risk of serious side effects.
Chronic migraine may still keep you from being there. Ask your doctor about Botox today. Learn how AbbVie can help you save.
All the news, all on Laura Coates Live, weeknights at 11 on CNN.
All right, new into CNN this afternoon. Israel says Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio earlier today. The Prime Minister's office said the two discussed the remaining hostages and Israel's renewed military offensive in Gaza. Palestinian health officials say more than 50,000 people have now been killed since the war between Hamas and Israel began, including at least 41 who died this weekend. Hamas says one of its senior political leaders was among those killed. And at this hour, a large delegation of U.S. officials is in Saudi Arabia meeting with Ukrainian representatives in an effort to end the war with Russia. The U.S. delegation is set to meet with Moscow officials tomorrow. These peace talks come just days after President Trump held a lengthy phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. That call resulted in the Kremlin agreeing to temporarily halting attacks on energy infrastructure targets. But Moscow stopped short of signing off on a broader ceasefire that the U.S. wants. Pope Francis is now recovering at his Vatican home after spending 5 weeks in the hospital. The 88-year-old pontiff was released this morning after doctors said his condition had stabilized. His medical team told reporters that during his stay, the Pope experienced 2 very critical episodes where his life was in danger. Earlier today, CNN's Ben Wiedemann was reporting live from outside the hospital when the Pope greeted a crowd as he was standing in the window.
And now on the second floor, I don't know if you can see it, there's an open window there where we're expecting Pope Francis to appear, and there he is. You can see him in white. So there, Victor, the crowd is applauding, he's waving. He's been rolled out on his wheelchair there. And yes, this is the first time we are seeing him. First time we are seeing him in more than 38 days. 38 days he's been here in Rome's Gemelli Hospital, suffering from double pneumonia.
A pretty incredible moment. Right now, CNN Vatican correspondent Christopher Lamb is with us. So Christopher, break down, what that moment was like, what his condition is overall, and what potentially happens next.
Well, Frederick, it was quite an extraordinary moment given what Pope Francis has been through these past 5 weeks. He's had a number of crises whilst he's been in the hospital, but on Sunday he came out to the balcony. He seemed very happy to be out of hospital. He greeted the crowd and he saw a lady there holding up yellow flowers, which he remarked upon. Let's take a look at what he said.
Sì, a tutti. E vedo questa signora con I fiori gialli. Che brava.
Now, that lady had been coming up to the Gemelli Hospital every day to pray for Pope Francis's recovery. She, like many others in Rome and across the world, are praying for the Pope to come through this health crisis. And of course, many will be heartened to see the Pope out of hospital. Now, of course, he has to undergo a period of convalescence and recovery. The doctors say he needs to spend at least 2 months recovering in his home at the Casa Santa Marta. He cannot, they say, have meetings with large groups of people, but he is due to meet King Charles on the 8th of April. It remains to be seen how the Pope is going to lead the church in this time. It's expected that he will slow down before hospitalization. He'd been keeping up a hectic pace of meetings and audiences. That is expected to be reduced as he tries to recover, but certainly a new moment of the Francis papacy is likely to be opened up, where Francis uses his fragility and vulnerability to show his solidarity with those people who are fragile and vulnerable. So I expect Francis to find a new way to be Pope whilst he recovers from this serious respiratory crisis. Frederica.
All right. And then Christopher, I mean, spring is, typically a very significant and busy time of year, for Catholics. So how is the Vatican going to manage the Pope's activity, those restrictions you just laid out during this period?
Well, we don't know what's going to happen at Easter. Of course, that's coming up pretty soon. Now, it's possible the Pope could attend some of these services rather than lead them. I don't expect him to be at all of them. It's not clear yet. Of course, Easter can take place without the Pope. That's happened before when John Paul II was very sick. So the Pope doesn't have to be at all these services, but I imagine he will try to make some sort of appearance over the Easter period, which of course is the high point of the Church's year. So it all kind of depends on how the Pope recovers in these coming weeks, whether he is obedient to the doctor's requests. It seems that the Pope is going to follow their orders for the time being, but of course it all depends on how Francis manages his recovery at home. If that goes well, then perhaps we could see him appear at Easter.
All right, we all look forward. Christopher Lamb, thank you so much. All right, still ahead, new details on the search for family, which mysteriously disappeared after a trip to the Grand Canyon.
I knew who Clarence Thomas was, and I knew how he had behaved toward me.
Do you think anybody was on your side?
For the most part, no.
United States of Scandal with Jake Tapper, tonight at 9 on CNN.
Trains. Trains that use the power of Dell AI and Intel, clearing the way so you arrive exactly where you belong.
I'm Howie Mandel, the newest ambassador of Skechers. Funny story how I became an ambassador. I went to the store and I lied and said I was an ambassador. Do I get a discount? The owner called me and said, would you like to be an ambassador for Skechers? And I said, yes. Try Skechers slip-ins.
I have type 2 diabetes, but I manage it well. It's a little pill with a big story to tell. I take once daily Jardians at each day start. As time went on, it was easy to see. I'm lowering my A1C.
And for adults with type 2 diabetes and known heart disease, Jardians can lower the risk of cardiovascular death too.
Serious side effects include increased ketones in blood or urine, which can be fatal. Stop Jardians and call your doctor right away if you have nausea, vomiting, stomach pain, tiredness, trouble breathing, or increased ketones. Jardians may cause dehydration that can suddenly worsen kidney function and make you feel dizzy, lightheaded, or weak upon standing. Genital yeast infections in men and women, urinary tract infections, low blood sugar, or a rare life-threatening bacterial infection between and around the anus and genitals can occur. Call your doctor right away if you have fever or feel weak or tired and pain, tenderness, swelling, or redness in the genital area. Don't use if allergic to Jardians. Stop use if you have a serious allergic reaction. Call your doctor if you have rash, swelling, difficulty breathing, or swallowing. You may have increased risk for lower limb loss. Call your doctor right away if you have new pain or tenderness, sores, ulcers, or infection in your legs or feet.
Jardians is really swell, the little pill with a big story to tell.
We can't predict when rates will drop, but while you wait, the perfect home is selling to someone else. With over 500,000 new real listings every month on Realtor.com, find yours before it's gone. Start your search today.
If you're only maxing out a 401k, you could add a Robinhood IRA with a 3% contribution boost.
Roger that.
Robinhood Gold gives you a 3% match on your annual
home and style staples to help you set any vibe. From custom lighting under $150 to vintage jackets under $100. For affordable pieces to help you make a fresh start, Etsy has it.
I'm a forgotten subscription. Poor guy signed up for my free trial a year ago and forgot to cancel. Now he pays me $18 every month. It's awesome.
Don't let this happen to you. Download Rocket Money today.
Precise designs, subtle curves, curated upgrades, elevated design for thoughtful living. Thuma.
We had 3 regular guys try Harry's for the first time.
Wow, this is beautiful.
Yeah, there it is. Smooth.
And told them an 8-pack of refills is $17.
Wow. I have to switch razors.
Get started for $7 at harrys.com/shaving.
Jewelry you'll love. Find us in-store and online.
Twitter breaking the bird tonight at 10 on CNN.
Closed captioning brought to you by Mesobook.com.
If you or a loved one have mesothelioma, we'll send you a free book to answer questions you may have. Call now and we'll come to you.
800-821-4000.
Arizona officials are asking for the public's help locating a South Korean family who has been missing for more than a week now. Officials say the family of 3 was on a road trip from the Grand Canyons to Las Vegas, and GPS data from their rental car last pinged on Interstate 40 around the time of a fiery pileup during this winter storm. The deadly crash involved 22 vehicles and burned for more than 20 hours. CNN correspondent Julia Vargas Jones is following the latest in the search for this family, and what are authorities saying?
Well, the investigators are still combing through that wreckage, Fred, a scene they say is intricate and time-consuming to process. But just last night, we heard from authorities there that in the early afternoon hours of Saturday, Highway Patrol investigators discovered additional remains that they believe may be human, and those are now with the county medical examiner. The Coconino County Sheriff's Office released that flyer asking for the public's help. They identify 33-year-old Jiyeon Lee, 59-year-old Tae-hee Kim, in 54-year-old Jung-hee Kim, as last seen on March 13, traveling westbound on that Interstate 40 in Arizona. Like you said, the last signal from their GPS was at 3:27 p.m., around the same time, in place as that deadly pileup. That was just outside Williams, Arizona. That collision involving 22 vehicles, some of them engulfed in flames that burned at extreme temperatures. That's from the Arizona DPS as well, saying that there was extensive destruction because of those temperatures. At least 2 people were killed and 16 others were taken to hospital. DPS says also that some passenger cars were rear-ended and pushed underneath some tractor trailers there. The teams are still examining the evidence from the crash site to identify other possible remains. That crash happened on that stretch of I-40 that was covered in snow and ice about 30 miles west of Flagstaff and 60 miles south of the Grand Canyon National Park entrance. Meanwhile, the Consulate General of South Korea here in Los Angeles is working closely with Arizona authorities, and anyone who's seen or heard of this family since the 13th is urged to contact Coconino County Sheriff's Office. Fred.
Okay, thank you so much. Julia Vargas-Jones. All right, and this just in. Police have now arrested 3 suspects in connection to a mass shooting in New Mexico that killed 3 teenagers. The suspects were charged with 3 open counts of murder, according to police. The chaotic scene of the shooting captured on video, which we do warn you, it is disturbing. Police say the shooting began after a fight between 2 groups during an unsanctioned car show at a park in Las Cruces on Friday. In addition to the 3 deaths, more than a dozen people were injured. The victims' ages ranging from 16 to 36. The FBI, ATF, and New Mexico State Police are investigating. And we're getting new details about a fire that broke out at one of Walt Disney World's theme parks in Orlando, Florida. A spokesperson for Disney told CNN a walk-in cooler caught on fire in a backstage area of the French Pavilion at Epcot Saturday. Visitors were evacuated from the pavilion area as a plume of heavy smoke filled the air. Disney officials say the pavilion was reopened to guests after the flames were quickly extinguished. They say there was damage to the building. No one, however, was injured. All right, coming up, President Trump's education secretary is defending the president's dismantling of the education department. But department advocates are worried that the changes will strip resources from children. An attorney who was just fired from the department joins me next.
United States of Scandal with Jake Tapper, tonight at 9 on CNN.
Trains. Trains that use the power of Dell AI and Intel, clearing the way so you arrive exactly where you belong.
After cooking a delicious Knorr Farm Stand chicken cheddar broccoli recipe, you will want to close all your delivery apps and open your camera so you can take photos of your homemade masterpiece. Unfortunately, no photo can capture the savory goodness of this perfect combo of juicy sweet tomatoes and smooth, silky zucchini.
Tasty.
You nailed it. Make your own Knorr taste combo. It's not fast food, but it's so good.
What if all I do for my type 2 diabetes isn't enough? Or what if?
Once weekly Mounjaro could help. Mounjaro helps your body regulate blood sugar and can help you eat less food. Plus, 3 out of 4 people reached an A1C of less than 7%. And people lost up to 25 pounds. Don't take Mounjaro if you're allergic to it, or if you or someone in your family had medullary thyroid cancer or multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome type 2. Stop and call your doctor right away if you have an allergic reaction, a lump or swelling in your neck, severe stomach pain, or vision changes. Serious side effects may include inflamed pancreas and gallbladder problems. Taking Mounjaro with sulfonylurea or insulin may raise your low blood sugar risk. Tell your doctor if you're nursing, pregnant, plan to be, or taking birth control pills. Side effects include nausea, diarrhea, and vomiting, which can cause dehydration and may worsen kidney problems.
I can do diabetes differently. with Mount Jaro.
Ask your doctor about Mount Jaro. All doses available.
The average dog only lives to be 10. At the Farmer's Dog, we don't think that's long enough. That's why our food comes in personalized portions. Because a dog at a healthy weight can live a longer, happier life.
Gives you all the feels. Crowd going crazy. Can you believe this? Ice in the veins. Emotions on full display. This is what March feels like. I've got the feeling, baby.
Today, persistent questions about the commitment and quality of children's public education, especially those with special needs. 4 days after President Trump signed an executive order to shut down the Education Department. Education Secretary Linda McMahon talked to our Dana Bash this morning in an exclusive interview and pledged this.
Can you guarantee to those parents and those students that there won't be any disruption with their education, the guarantees for their education?
I certainly hope. I would like to see even more funding go to the states for that. And if it rests with HHS, which is one of the suggestions, that funding clearly is going to continue to come from Congress. And we want to make sure that those students do have those special services and those needs which they have, which is really monitored and taken care of at the state level.
With me now is Brittany Coleman, an attorney at the Education Department's Office for Civil Rights in Dallas, who was just laid off. Brittany, glad you could be with us. So sorry that you were laid off, but I'm wondering if you can tell us specifically, what did your job entail?
So my job entailed evaluating complaints that we received from students or their parents or concerned citizens concerning possible violations of civil rights, where it could be students who have special needs or have an individualized education plan where they were supposed to receive special services like additional testing on time for taking a test, just making sure that those points were followed so that students could receive everything they need to succeed in the classroom. Also, just making sure that students weren't being discriminated against or in hostile environments, and that could be because of their disabilities or because of their sex or their race or their national origin. So really the whole point was just to make sure that students could focus on educating themselves and learning in the classroom in an environment where they were free from harassment and receiving all the tools, funding, and education that they need.
And now with your removal, what are your concerns about what services, might not be available, or what might happen to some of the civil rights related cases that you were working on?
So I'm very concerned about just the fact that there are going to be just continuous chaos and delays because of what we're seeing. Some of your viewers may not be aware of the fact that we did have 12 regional offices all over the country, including the regional office in Dallas. We've gone from 12 regional offices down to 5. And now the expectation is that the remaining staff in those 5 regional offices will take on those complaints. That's going to be a heavy workload. I can say in the OCR Dallas office, we already had a heavy workload because we were the largest the office in Dallas, because we handled all of Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, those cases. So now you're expecting all those cases to be farmed out to other regions where they already have their own caseload. So my concern is that, the student that may need additional time to take tests, or the students that are having difficulty accessing a stadium or a football field because there may be ramps and other access points that are not in compliance with regulations, that they're not going to get that relief on time in a manner that's going to allow them to be able to fully access those things so that they can do well on tests, or they can access a stadium and fully participate like other students. So it's just concern after concern that, with what we're seeing by just shoveling this work off to other regional offices that are already short-staffed anyway throughout OCR, that it means that students aren't going to get the help that they need in a timely manner, and that it can cause lasting effects because we're not able to intervene in time.
And I also understand that you are an Education Department union leader. So, what are you hearing from other employees about the level of anxiety that they are feeling, their worries about themselves and the school children, and situations just like you just played out?
So anxiety is right, along with just chaos and just feeling distressed over the fact that we are not able to provide the services that we normally provide. That complainants who are waiting on relief in the Office for Civil Rights are not getting timely responses, not getting timely relief. As a union leader, I have the pleasure of serving everyone who's in the bargaining unit at the Department of Education. So I interacted with other units such as Federal Student Aid. And as we know that this is a crucial time right now for students who are applying for college and for grad school and trade schools to figure out what their next steps are. The concerns I have is that we've cut our staff so severely that their FAFSA applications are not being processed on time, and that students and their parents who are calling in for additional information are dealing with the fact that FAFSA, broke at one point, not this past week, but the week before, or that they're dealing with extremely long wait times. We're talking 5 hours just to get answers to questions. Like, this can impact what students know as far as their financial options on where they want to make their next steps, or it could possibly prevent them from going to achieve higher education at all if they don't get their financial information timely. It can also mean impacts on grants that help put teachers in classrooms, because that was done by another area of our agency where we're putting funding into low-income areas to make sure that they can get great teachers to help teach our students. So now the concern is that if we're not administering those grants, where's that money going to come from? And also, too, I just want to emphasize just the overall oversight. We are gravely concerned that because we're not able to do our jobs, that we're not having accountability to where federal dollars are going. We need to make sure that there's oversight to ensure that those dollars are getting to students who have special needs or getting to low-income areas, and that money is being used in a manner that complies with federal laws. And the concern is now that we're not there to watch that. What is happening to that money, and how do we make sure that it's actually getting to those students? And I'm gravely concerned that it won't get to where it needs to be, and there's going to be no one there to make sure that it does.
Well, all of what you just said, all of it is so heartbreaking. And Brittany Coleman, we so appreciate you coming on and sharing about your experience, your perspective on this, and your perseverance. I mean, here you no longer have a job with the Department of Education in that Dallas office, and we can still hear, the passion and the commitment that you have with your responsibilities that came with your job and your commitment over some 7 years or so as a civil servant.
So where does Boasberg's case stand right now? Is he going to be able to get to the bottom of whether or not his order was violated? Because he's pledged to do that.
Of course, he's pledged to do that, and that's how the courts work. You don't get to skirt one court's order by appealing to another. You do get to appeal a decision, and that's what, of course, the government has done. And that's what the government should do, of course, if it feels as if, it needs to appeal.
He's not too concerned with, the populist opinion insofar as if he could get elected for a third time. Right. He's in office and he's there to stay for another 3 years. And I think he's more so focused on the consolidation of power. And I think that he knows that as long as he has the richest man in the world at his side, he has so much more power than anybody around him, on top of being the president of America. So I think he'll probably stick by his side.
Yeah, Dean brings up a really important point about why he benefits from Elon Musk, politically speaking. You see Elon is now getting involved in this Wisconsin Supreme Court race. He's also said that he's willing to primary people who are not full MAGA. And on top of that, you're getting free, as I mentioned earlier, getting officials who are willing to publicly come out and tout buying Tesla stock and saying that if you're a protester against Tesla, you're going to be deported to El Salvador. So in some way, and then as we mentioned, contracts worth millions of dollars that Musk is going to benefit from. There's a convergence of mutual interest here.
Yes, no, for sure. And look, if maybe Donald Trump will not act the way he did in Trump 1.0. Maybe he won't. Maybe he's learned enough lessons and he's become, but if you look at 1.0, he never was able to keep a relationship like this going. And who knows? But I would say, look, you're right. Elon has absolutely, and in fact, he said, or he maybe made donations to politicians who wanted to impeach judges, right? So he is definitely a critical part of this organization. But, the question is Trump the Trump he was the first time he served as president? And if he is, then he can't keep these kind of relationships going. Or is he a new Trump? And maybe he is.
What do you think? You want to weigh in on that?
Trump is no longer the mastermind. Trump is not.
You don't think so?
No, okay. Trump is not the mastermind. Peter Thiel and his cabal of techno-feudalists are calling the shots. This is Peter Thiel's government. He installed his vice president, J.D. Vance, and Elon and the rest of the people who want to push us towards techno-feudalism, crypto-fascism, all that good stuff, they're calling the shots here. Trump has been a puppet in all sorts of ways for a very long time. He's been a puppet of Putin. He's been a puppet of the Christian nationalist base. He's never really the mastermind that people say he is. And right now, I am of the belief, and a lot of people would agree, it's specifically the crypto-fascists calling the shots. Folks like Peter Thiel and those individuals who want to tank the economy so the billionaires can actually seize more power than they've ever had.
It's interesting you say that because Trump... Sorry, go ahead, Dean, go ahead.
Oh, no worries. I was just going to say that's a good point. I feel like for a long time, we saw Trump wanting to make all the shots and do what's necessary to be in control. But I think what he wants most is power, and he's now recognizing that working with other people, letting Elon Musk call some of the shots, and just appealing to his voter base, being a populist, giving them what they want, even if it's contradicting, messaging that he had 4 or 8 years ago. He's willing to do whatever it takes to put himself ahead, even if it means working with others.
Yeah, but so what's the ultimate end game, you think, Dean, for Donald Trump? I mean, the Steve Bannons and others say there is this kind of, I would argue, kind of turf war that is emerging. Steve Bannon does not like Elon Musk. Steve Bannon claims to represent the populist or be a part of the populist base that rejects this kind of techno-feudalism that is emerging at the hands of Peter Thiel and Elon Musk. And he seems to still have the access to Donald Trump. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on how this plays out between this internal rivalry in the GOP.
Well, Steve Bannon and Elon Musk can both agree on one thing, which is that Hitler salutes are something that they ought to do on big stages in front of everybody. But at the end of the day, Steve Bannon, he is a big Trump puppeteer, totally. But Steve Bannon is not a, trillionaire or however much money Elon's got. And at the end of the day, Elon's money is calling the shots. Elon money is how they're going to be buying the elections right now. That's who's in charge right now.
Dean, did you want to say something as well on that?
Yeah, I hear this question a lot. What is Trump's endgame? And my response is the same every single time. I don't know. And the reason that's my response is because I'm not sure he knows. I think that we've kind of see this fight for power, control, money, influence, and we've seen this depicted in so many ways, and we always see him trying to take the path of least resistance to get there, even if it means breaking some moral or ethical boundaries. A great example of this would be the 2020 election and his fake elector plot. And I don't know if he really knows his end game, and he's more so just doing whatever it takes to put himself ahead, put his people ahead, and hold on to as much of that power and influence as possible. And I don't even really know if he's all that focused or concerned with infighting within his base, such as Steve Bannon disagreeing with Elon Musk. I don't even know if that thought has crossed his head. I think he's more focused on putting himself first, and because Steve Bannon isn't coming after him, but is coming after somebody in his orbit, even if they're super close like Elon, I don't think he really cares.
All right, everyone stay put. We're going to squeeze in a quick break. When we come back, Trump stripped security clearance. Good on his promise for political retribution. In a memo, he stripped security clearances for a long list of opponents, from Kamala Harris to Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden and members of his family. He also targeted high-profile Republican critics, including former members of Congress, Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. To absolutely no one's surprise, Molly. The retribution tour continues, and Donald Trump is basically doing everything he projected for 4 years on Joe Biden.
He said, I am going to be your retribution, but what he meant was, I'm going to be my retribution.
Right.
Look, Mark Said, the lawyer, was on Twitter yesterday saying, this is the third time Trump has taken away his security clearance. Like, once enough, right? Like, more taking it away doesn't make it less secure, right? So there's quite a lot of this. He likes to tweet. Look, he has resentments. Yeah. And like any good person late at night, he wants to tweet about them. And so, it gets, he's in there, 78 years old, and he has a list of people who he's not pleased with, and he will take away their security clearances.
Let me play for you how he bragged about this, Cameron, and then I'll get your thoughts on the other side of it. Watch.
My administration stripped the security clearances of the disgraced intelligence agents who lied about Hunter Biden's laptop from hell. We revoked the clearances of deranged Jack Smith, Alvin Bragg, Letitia James, and the crooked law firms that aided their partisan persecutions.
So how much do you think this is a dry run for more sinister things to see if he can get away with it? I mean, this stuff right now, maybe not a lot of people are going to object to it. Certainly not a lot of uproar, given the fact so many other things that are, I would argue, a little bit more important taking place. But the fact that he's doing this on an individual basis, the fact that he's going after people that are clearly people he perceives as his political enemies and critics, as a test run for then going up one more notch down the road.
Targeting political enemies is personal conversations or in business, perhaps. That is not how we should be doing it. The Republicans don't go low anymore. They are low. Low is where they operate. They have pulled the bar down to hell. And we need to meet them there, meet them where they're at, and fight them right there in hell. Because there's no more rules, there's no more conventions, away with the law, away with anything at all. The Republicans do what they want to do, they target who they want to target, and there are no legal precedents that are going to be able to stop them from this violent agenda. So I need to see Democrats stand up and start to disrupt, get in the way of everything, and do everything they can to stop Trump. Because there's not going to be a point at which Trump says, okay, that's enough authoritarianism for me, I'm going to chill out now.
But what about decorum?
Oh, of course, decorum, right. Make sure you don't cuss while you're doing it.
Yeah,
Make sure
don't stand up in the middle of a joint address to Congress, Dean, and wave your cane, because then your Democratic colleagues are going to get really angry at you for violating decorum.
I mean, every Democrat who voted to punish
censure Al Green,
Al Green for what he did, every single one of those Democrats should not be reelected. Those are people who are just actively
Hey, Kate. Well, bond has been denied for the suspect in this shocking murder. According to court records, Cobb County police here in Georgia have identified the suspect as 21-year-old Hector Sagastume Rivas, a migrant with no legal status to live in the United States. An Immigration and Customs Enforcement spokesperson has confirmed to CNN that Sagastume Rivas is from Honduras. He's charged for now with felony murder. ICE also told us that Sagastume Rivas crossed the U.S. border illegally in March 2021. He was issued a notice to appear and later ordered removed by an immigration judge in July 2023. He's accused of killing 52-year-old Camellia Williams, a mother of 5 and grandmother who was originally from Louisiana. The arrest warrant says that late on March 11 or early the following day, Rivas killed William, putting her in a chokehold, then kneeling on her neck with his full body weight. The woman's body was found in a wooded area hidden under a bush on March 13. The suspect was arrested several days later. A brother of the victims told CNN affiliate WSB he had told his sister he wanted her to return home to Louisiana. Let's take a listen.
The kids are going to miss her. Her grandkids are going to miss her. I chatted with her last week. Try to get her to move back down.
And the murder has been strongly condemned by several Republican leaders here in Georgia, including Governor Brian Kemp. Kate?
Raphael, thank you so much. Sarah?
All right. Mia Love was a first, and then brain cancer invaded her life. She died at just 49 years old. CNN's Jake Tapper has details.